Well, this video is going to be sort of an educational little tutorial. This is a 1941 John Deere Model H. This is going to be just a little bit of information about the Model H and a little bit of information about the two-cylinder John Deeres in general. The Model H was produced from, I believe, 1939 to 1947, and it's a two-cylinder. Horizontal, what a lot of people consider the Johnny Popper or Poppin' Johnny. Get the real distinct pop, pop, pop sound, which is totally different than any of the other tractors of the day, and is, never really been replicated by any other manufacturer still to this day. Unfortunately, the two-cylinder, wasn't around forever, and John Deere doesn't even make those anymore. But so this tractor is a lot of people would call this a tricycle front end because it's got the two narrow wheels in the front. In later models, and an option that was added was called Roll-O-Matic, which the axles in the front were independent. If you hit a bump with one wheel, that wheel would go up, the other one would not. This is your standard tricycle front end, does not have the Roll-O-Matic. They're pretty standard in terms of, how an internal combustion engine works. You've got, gas comes in to a carburetor, then it goes into the cylinder, it is ignited by a spark plug, and then the exhaust gases go out and up and out the stack. Now, this is a water-cooled engine. It does not have a water pump, which is kind of interesting. A lot of tractors back then did not have a water pump. In fact, International Harvester coined the term thermosiphon for their engines, which essentially did the same thing that these do. The heat from the engine is transferred into the water. The water goes up this pipe into the radiator, and the fan is always turning. As long as the engine's running, the fan is always blowing across the radiator. So the water then is cooled in the radiator, and the cold water then travels back along this bottom pipe back into the engine. So it's heating and cooling cycle forces the water to flow through the system. It works very well. It's one less thing to have to worry about is a water pump. The air cleaner system in these tractors is a little bit different than most people consider nowadays. You've got a cartridge filter that you throw away. These use an oil bath. Behind this, and you can see the label there, says something about every 30 hours. There is a ridge on this bottom canister here, and that's the oil level. So to change the oil in this system, you would unscrew this band clamp, take this bottom canister off. There's oil in it, dump it out, fill it back up with clean oil, put it back on there. And how the system works is air is drawn in on the H's. It's drawn in through the side panel here. It's drawn in, down through the oil bath, and back up a filter media, and then into the carburetor. This is a hand start tractor. There's no electrical on this tractor other than the two plug wires and the magneto. The magneto generates a spark as the operator turns the wheel to start it. So to start this tractor, you actually roll this. This is the flywheel. There's finger grooves back here. You'll never see them, but I can feel them. There's notches for your fingers to sit in. So you actually roll this over, and it causes, everything to move internally. It makes the magneto spin and load up on an impulse cup, which is spring loaded, to snap over and create the spark. So the only electrical on this whole tractor is that magneto and two spark plug wires, one for each side. The fuel system on this tractor is pretty interesting. You'll notice two caps back here. If we look up under here, it's going to be hard to tell, but there is a main fuel tank that goes from about here forward to about here. That's the main fuel tank, and then there's a little bitty tank on the back, and it only probably holds about a half a gallon. Back in the day, there was more than just gasoline to be used for fuel. There was a substance called tractor distillate. A lot of guys call it kerosene. It was cheaper than gasoline back then. So the distillate burns at a lower temperature than does gasoline. So distillate is hard to run in a cold engine, but once the engine gets warmed up, then you can run a gas engine on this tractor Distillate that used to be around, which is no longer produced. To my knowledge, it's no longer produced by anyone. So what you would do is this again would have been the gasoline tank, and you would start the engine up on gasoline. There was a valve. There would have been a valve right here. It's missing on this tractor now. You would have had the valve in the G selection, and that would have been for gas. And that valve operates, or that lever would have operated a valve here to select. It's called a three-way valve, I think is what they call them on these John Deeres. Anyhow, you would start the tractor on gasoline. Gasoline would be going to the engine. After the engine warmed up, you would flip this selector to F for fuel, and it would then select this fuel tank here, and you would just not miss a beat and keep on running. With that though, because the engine doesn't like to run on that distillate as nice as it likes gasoline, they did a couple of things with these engines to get them to accommodate that distillate. You'll notice that the carburetor and exhaust are both attached to the same manifold. The exhaust manifold encases the intake manifold. So there's only one manifold on these old two-cylinder tractors, the all-fuel tractors. You see, this is the other side of that same manifold, and this is where the exhaust pipe comes out. So the air enters the intake side over there, and the intake manifold is inside the exhaust manifold. So the hot air from the exhaust is transferred to the cold air coming into the engine. So it's actually preheated, which is kind of counterintuitive to today's engines. You know, everybody wants that performance cold air intake. Cold air will allow for more expansion and more compression in your cylinder. Well, back in the day, they wanted hot air intake. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Another thing that they did to accommodate these low engine operating temperatures with this distillate was either curtains or shutters on the front of a tractor. And you'll notice on the dash here, there's this knob. It's not connected to anything now, but that selector was for a set of either curtains or shutters. It would have been in front of the radiator, which would have blocked airflow across the radiator to make it so that the tractor did not cool itself as efficiently. So you would actually close the curtains or close the radiator to block air so that the thing would generate more heat and keep the heat in the system so that it would run better. So that's a little bit interesting on the intake side of it. Now, you'll also notice this glass fixture here. This is called a sediment bowl. And the sediment bowl is on the main tank. So any dirt or contaminants, rust in these old tanks and stuff, the idea is that fuel comes from the tank directly down into the sediment bowl, and then it allows any of the contaminants and stuff to settle in this glass bowl, and it's glass so that you can see it, you can see through it and keep an eye on how much junk is accumulating in here. When you start getting an accumulation of stuff, you unscrew this nut on the bottom, you remove the glass, dump out all the dirt, wipe it out with a rag, stick it back up in there, and that's how you keep, or it helps keep your fuel system clean. This engine also has a manually operated choke. So down on this engine, or on this H anyhow, down is choke and up is no choke. Carburetor adjustments on here. This is an idle adjust screw. This is a load adjust screw. So when the engine is all the way idled down and you're not using it to pull, you can adjust your idle here. And when you're using it, when you're actually pulling out in the field, that's kind of a two-man operation, I think, is how that's supposed to work. You know, one person actually is adjusting this while another person is operating the tractor, pulling an implement to adjust the load. The throttle on this tractor, all the way back is closed throttle, all the way forward is full throttle. This tractor has hydraulics. This is a single lever, this has the pump on it still, the reservoir and the pump, but it doesn't have a line. There should be a line come off of here that would go back to a hydraulics in the rear. Again, it's hand start, so it's, you want to make sure that your engine selector is in neutral, or your transmission selector is in neutral whenever you would be up here to start this thing. Moving on back here, the tires are kind of interesting on these old tractors, and still even most modern tractor tires, the way they designate the size of the tire. You'll see this is a 9-32. On your cars and trucks and stuff, you always have 3 numbers. On these tractor and ag tires, you have 2 numbers. And what that 9 means is it's 9 inches wide and it's 32 inches on the rim. And it does not give a designation for the overall height of the tire, so that's kind of interesting. So a 932 tire is 9 inches wide on a 32-inch rim, and who knows how tall the overall size of the tractor tire actually is. The John Deere's, the old 2-cylinders, were also hand clutch. You'll notice there's only 2 pedals here. You've got a steering brake for each side in the rear. This pedal operates the right side. That pedal over there operates the brake on the left side. There are no brakes on the front wheels. And this clutch, there again, no clutch pedal. The clutch is engaged by hand. That's your clutch rod. And when the tractor's in gear, if you're traveling with the tractor, you have the clutch engaged and you're in gear and you're moving. When you want to slow down and stop, you can release the clutch and pull back even further on this handle, which will engage a brake pad on the pulley. So you can drive this tractor, and I do whenever I'm driving my tractors. I hardly ever use the brake pedals. I typically just brake with the clutch handle as well. So they're fairly easy to drive. They're a little bit different when you're, if you're used to a foot clutch. Hand clutch is a little bit different to get, the hang of, but it's really not bad at all. And it's actually pretty handy then when you consider it's got the brake feature on it. So that's very nice. You see the backside of the magneto here. This is a really common 2-cylinder John Deere magneto. This is a Wyco manufactured C model magneto. A lot of the later 2-cylinders use the Wyco X magneto, but that's the C, and I believe they're interchangeable. If you've got a C, you can put an X on, and vice versa. If you have an X and your magneto goes bad, you can use a C. That's pretty much the basics on the overall setup on the tractor. The checks that you need to do when when you want to drive the tractor. First thing, one of the things you want to do is check your water level in the radiator. So we got water there. You want to check your fuel level. This is the main primary tank. Most of your John Deeres nowadays, if you ever see one out, and you see that it still has, the dual fuel, this back tank they're not using, and that's the case with this one. It's pretty grungy down in there. I think one of the previous owners before me, it looks like they put some kind of, maybe like a used motor oil down in there, possibly to help preserve the tank from rusting any further. So that's something that, you want to be cognizant of when you go to operate one of these old tractors. Make sure, if it is plumbed in still, that you don't select that original gas tank, because there's probably contaminants in there. And if you do move your selector and you select that tank, you're going to allow those contaminants into your primary fuel system, which would be really, really a pain in the butt. So keep that in mind if you ever out messing around with one of these old tractors. And this is typically the tank, the big tank is typically the one that's only in use anymore. So you want to make sure you got gas in there. Hopefully you can see that down in there. A lot of guys like to use 100% gasoline in these old tractors. The gasoline that you get at most all filling stations is a certain percentage of ethanol. You'll read on the sticker there on the pump, it'll say up to 10% ethanol. Well, you can guarantee that it is 10% ethanol, because ethanol is so much cheaper to blend into the fuel. So a lot of people with these old engines, these old antique engines, they like to find a station somewhere, and there is one around me that sells 100% gasoline, 100% petroleum, no ethanol in it at all. It's significantly more expensive. Typically it's a supply and demand sort of thing, so I don't know what they pay for it, but they charge an arm and a leg. I think I was paying $4 a gallon for it. I bought a few gallons last year and put in all my tractors at the recommendation of some old guys in the tractor club, and my tractors ran like shit. So I stick with high octane fresh fuel. I put stabilizer in all my fuel, and I tried the 100% gasoline stuff, and these tractors, they would sit for a couple of weeks. I'd try to start them up again, and they would just run like crap. They were hard to start. They ran like crap, adjusting everything, you know, adjusting the carburetor and stuff. And I switched back to the just regular gas station gas, high octane with fuel stabilizer, and they run so much better again. So that was my personal experience. You know, maybe there was some kind of hiccup that I'm not accounting for. Maybe there was something in that specific tank of gasoline that I got bad. I don't know, but that was my experience. So I stay away from that stuff now. I'm going to move this tractor. So to do a startup, you also want to check the oil. Now, I'm not going to do it. I did it last night on this tractor. To check the oil in these old John Deeres, there's a kind of an odd looking fastener sticking out behind the flywheel. And this bolt head, it's a specialty bolt. It's got a tapered end on it, and it makes a seat, or there's a seat in here and there's a seal in, it makes a seal. You put a wrench on this bolt and unscrew it just a little bit. There's a hole in the bottom down here of the like nut looking thing here. And if oil drips out, you know you've got enough oil to run. So rather than having a dipstick, you just unscrew that bolt head a little bit, and if oil runs out, you know you got plenty of oil. In fact, you can see a little bit of oil on my finger there. It's kind of dark and black, probably could use changed, but I'll wipe off my finger here. So I'm going to try to start this tractor up with one hand. These old tractors, and I guess I should mention this, a lot of them do have a PTO, you know, just very similar to your standard tractors of today. These old hand starts can be a little bit finicky, so the procedure we're going to go with this tractor is, first you want to turn on your fuel on the backside of the sediment bowl here. It's kind of hard to get to, but I get my hand twisted around up in there. I'm unthreading a valve on the backside of this sediment bowl right now. You can't see it, but that's what I'm doing here. So I'm turning this valve, and I want to turn it all the way open. That valve has a seat on the front and a seat on the back. When you open these up, open them up all the way and back seat them. It'll keep it from leaking at that valve, or help to keep from leaking. I'm going to put it down in the choke position, full choke. This is our throttle on the carburetor. So I'm going to reach up here, and I'm going to adjust the handle till I get about almost half throttle. Again, I'm going to make sure I'm in neutral on my gear shifter, and I'm going to roll this over till I feel resistance. That's compression on number 1 cylinder. So I'm going to roll it with one hand and see if it'll pop. Okay, we rolled through. Well, that was compression on number 2 cylinder. There's 1. There's cylinder 2. There's cylinder 1. Cylinder 2. I heard a little bit of pop out of the engine there. They can be finicky. Some of these things, if you don't have your throttle set just right, or your choke just right, they can take a bit to get going. So, well, I'm going to take 2 hands and put on that flywheel and adjust this thing slightly. I'll get it started. I'll be right back with you. Well, just a few more rolls on the flywheel there, and it started right up. So I'm going to open up this door before we get gassed out in here. We're going to go for a little ride. We're going to move the tractor from this spot here over into the barn. So things to be aware of when you're around these old tractors is that flywheel's turning all the time as it's running. And, you know, just always keep that in mind. Block of wood under the wheel here. It won't take anything to drive right over top of that though. So to get on this old tractor, it can be kind of a pain sometimes, but you want to hold on to the seat, put your right foot on the drawbar, step your left foot up onto the axle there, maybe hold on to the steering wheel here, left foot on the axle, and then your right foot go on the platform. So we're sitting here. We got our gear selectors reversed, 1, 2, and 3. And we want to go first gear. Turn first. We're going to throttle it up a bit. going to work the clutch with our hand. And you'll notice that when I engage this, that pulley is going to start to turn. So that pulley is also for running implements off of a belt. You'll notice sometimes, tractor shows or old black and white pictures that there would be implements out in front of the tractor that the belt was on. That's how you would belt up a tractor to a piece of equipment. And if you notice on some of those pictures, the belt has a twist halfway. If the tractor runs in one rotation, but the implement needs to run backwards to the tractor, you just twist the belt. It's kind of ingenuitive, a simple thing, but a lot of folks don't even know that. So we're going to pull out here. So I'm going to engage the clutch. We're going to climb up over that 2x4. Pull it over there and park it in that barn. I'm going to have to move a few things before I can pull it in there. Notice there's another John Deere over there and there's another one in here yet. So to stop, I'm going to disengage the clutch and pull back hard, and that applies the brake. So that's really it for driving the thing. Now if we wanted to shut it off, climb back down again. And to shut this thing off, I would reach up under here, turn off the fuel, and then walk away from the tractor and let it run itself dry, or open this valve and drain the fuel out of the carburetor. And you always want to drain the fuel out of your carburetor just simply so that the fuel doesn't evaporate and leave behind deposits in your carburetor. So that's pretty much it for this demonstration here, guys. We'll idle her back down while I move this other stuff. If you want to see more videos of me messing around with this stuff out here, click that subscribe button. If you like this video, click that thumbs up button. And until the next video, guys, keep on tinkering.